Hi. So we start. Hi,
Hi.
Everyone. Hello and welcome to our latest talk in the series of the Deutsche Bank Collection Live, Meet the Artist. My name is Britta Färber. I'm the Chief Curator of the Deutsche Bank Collection, and I'm really proud and happy, and it's my great honor to welcome Rana Begum. Hi, Rana. How are you?
Hi.
We are delighted that works by Rana Begum are currently being presented in our exhibition Ways of Seeing Abstraction, works from the Deutsche Bank Collection at the Palais Populaire in Berlin. And we were able to open digitally last week, but still not till today, it's really open. You can visit it by appointment, of course, but its museums in Berlin are still open. So keep our fingers crossed. Just before we start, I have a few organizational points. During the conversation, please be so kind to mute yourself. You will have the opportunity to pose questions through the Q&A function later on. Also, if you have any technical problems, please be so kind to put them up in the chat function. And last but not least, the conversation, the talk will be streamed on YouTube as well as on Facebook, where you can watch it now or later on. Good, but now back to Rana. Let me introduce you to Rana Begum. Rana Begum was born in Bangladesh in 1977 and now lives and works in London. She's well known for her minimalist work that create ordered form from spatial and visual experiences. Her visual languages draw from the urban landscape as well as from geometric patterns from traditional Islamic art and architecture. Light is fundamental to her process. Rana has studied at Chelsea College of Art and Design and the Slade School of Fine Art in London. She has had many important international exhibitions, including a major museum show at the Sainsbury Centre for Visual Arts in Norwich. And she has completed commissions in Cambridge, London, and Dubai, where she was awarded the Abraj Prize of the Art Dubai in 2017. She was also elected a member of the Royal Academy in 2020, which is a very, very prestigious appointment. So congratulations on this one, Rana. Really, really great. So I would love to start with a personal question. You recently participated in Culture in Quarantine on the BBC, and you gave a masterclass showing how you work with the watercolors, which only by watching it, it's so calming and so wonderful. I was tempted to get watercolors myself.
Yeah.
And how was the pandemic these 12 months is affecting you?
It was, I mean, this time round, it's a little bit more, it was a little bit calmer because I shared the childcare, with their father. So last year, it was quite, I found it obviously, like a lot of people, really stressful and also actually quite traumatic because there was a lot happening at the same time. I had to prioritize their homeschooling, but at the same time, I was thinking about my own kind of mental health and not having any kind of time for myself and to kind of, just working again. And because my team weren't able to come into the studio, I felt really isolated. But I think, part of it was that I was able to kind of console myself in terms of that everyone was in the same situation. And I thought, well, how can I actually find a way where I can still do the homeschooling and and create and keep myself calm. And I started doing these watercolors, and it was frustrating initially when I started doing them because each time I had to stop. I couldn't keep the consistency going. But then I carried on. I thought, no, I will forget about what the end result is. What I'm just going to focus on is the rhythm and the repetition and the process of applying the paint on a grid, was keeping kind of my mind focused on the grid keeping myself calm. And you know, the minute I started doing that, I think the works, each of the watercolors kind of came together, and it created almost like a story. You know, every time I paused, those accidents, or when the brush was kind of loaded up with paint, it created a different kind of rhythm. And I got more and more intrigued. And at the same time, I was doing this project as well where I was photographing. So where I live is this kind of this beautiful location where it's overlooking a cemetery. And it's a listed cemetery, so it's just, the view is just of trees, and so you have dappled light kind of coming through into the building. And so it's kind of making me think about light a lot as well, and how the light was kind of filtering through. I mean, there was lots of things going on in my head, but I wanted to find a way to kind of keep myself calm, and you know, and stay on top of kind of, I guess, my emotions and my mental health, you know, at the time, which, yeah, I can't imagine how people, and I did have lovely messages, you know, people have watched the video and have said that they've started doing watercolors, and that's really nice, because it was something that I felt that people could pick up and try out, and watercolor is so accessible. Even if you're not an expert, you know, I have no, I wouldn't say I'm a watercolor expert, but it was fun. I really enjoyed it. I managed to even get the kids into it as well. And
the result is so beautiful. I mean, at the same time, it's really something, it's wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at Agnes Martin quite a bit during that time, because I was trying to figure out a way, you know, to see how other artists coped with isolation. And, you know, some artists obviously deliberately isolated themselves and wanted to kind of, and were creating amazing works through that isolation, through that kind of space that they created for themselves.
Yeah, great. I mean, and the project you were talking about with the light, it's the one you show on Instagram, right?
So I actually, I'm doing two projects. One is kind of, it's a kind of just an ongoing research for me. So wherever I am in the world, even when I'm traveling, if there was moments in the day that I can find where it captures the change of light, I try and do that. So I started that in St. Ives when I was doing the residency with Tate St. Ives. And then the other project is for a show that's coming up in 2021. It's a big kind of solo show that is focusing on you know, body of work that I've been developing in the last few years. And one of them is where I'm taking photographs every hour for a whole year. And I want to, I mean, I don't know if it's going to be successful or not, you know, so again, it's really uncertain how this will come out. But the idea is to kind of see the change of light throughout the year. So the photographs will go up on a big kind of 13, 14 meter wall, where you would see a full year just during the day, how the light changes. And what's also quite lovely is that there are interruptions within that, within the day, that I'm quite appreciating. You know, sometimes my daughter leaves the bedroom light on, so you'd have a photograph of, you know, the reflection of the artificial light as well. So it's been interesting. The last few years I've been looking at those kind of interruptions, those kind of accidents that kind of appear in the work. They bring something into the work that I quite enjoy.
Great. So I will just share my screen now, and meanwhile, just to show the audience something of your work. But meanwhile, I mean, what you've just been saying is really leading to something I was. Hang on, that's multitasking. I have to go back. Hang on, now I'm in the middle of in the middle of the presentation, but we let us just keep this one at the back because it's also talking about light a lot, of course. And you've been saying what I was a bit stunned about. You've said that the light in the UK is duller, but many shades richer than apparently the light.
Well, I think there's depth to it, and I mean, what I love about living in the UK is that you really notice the seasons, and I think that's why I'm doing this other project, the photography project, which I'm hoping that I can capture that the intensity that you sometimes have, even in the winter when the sun really kind of comes through. There's something about it that in the UK, that the variation that really I'm drawn to. But I also love, I remember growing up in Bangladesh, that was my memory of kind of the rice fields, or being surrounded by water and the light. That's very strong. So I grew up in the countryside in Bangladesh. The colors were much more intense. Whereas the last few times I visited Bangladesh, it's been at the time of the year where it's kind of been humid, or it's the pollution in the air, it's kind of makes it quite foggy. So the memories are quite kind of intense of my experience growing up in the countryside, with the kind of the green and the color, the colors and of landscape.
Yeah. And how were you drawn to light in the very beginning? How did it come up? I mean, why is it so absolutely fundamental to your work?
I think it came up through this need to have change within the work. I really so I feel like sometimes when I'm looking at work that I want, I have difficulty focusing or keeping the attention, my own attention, and especially when it's flat, I struggle with that. So I think for me, there needed to be another element that allowed you to kind of keep coming back to the work, keep getting drawn to the work, whether it's throughout the day, whether you see it or experience it in the morning light or the afternoon light. There needed to be some kind of interaction with the work. And I think that's when natural light came into it, because it was something that I had no control over. So it was daylight that is there, that's that is anyone can experience, but that changes the experience of the work and how the material kind of works with that. So in this case, for instance, 814 was I did it for Frieze 2018, and that particular year, the most of the summer, we had this incredible summer where it was just like really intense sun, and it worked almost like a sundial, so you could see the reflection kind of go, stretching out and going beyond its perimeter of the work. And for me, I think this is probably one work that really explains what it is that I'm trying to achieve in most of my work, which is this change, this how natural element like light makes the work active, if you like.
And also the perspective, of course, of the viewer, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's lovely to see this model and where you and then you can imagine. And in the first image, you see somebody standing behind it, and if you look from the other side, it's different from the side perspective.
Well, this was, so there's lots of things happening here. I feel like I've reached a position now where, I initially my research was about light and form. In order to understand it, in order to understand abstract or minimalist art, I had to do my own research, and I took a more practical approach to my research rather than a theoretical approach. And when I did that, my initial research looked at kind of material surface, how light, would interact with the material, and how sometime, the light would kind of filter through, or it will just be, on the surface, and the play of light and shadow as well. And then I spent a few years researching color. And so I feel like at that stage, when I made 814, I felt there was a lot of things that were coming together, and I was also looking at how I could create this third layer of color. And in this case, I'm using kind of very obvious kind of primary colors, I would say, that would interact with each other to create this third layer. And it's literally simply just kind of positioning those flat planes, slightly off or shifting to create these layers. And that was a really exciting moment when I realized that the possibilities within those works. And so they stem from studies that I've been doing on MDF, these kind of paintings. And those paintings stem from bar work. So each of those, there's lots of different body of work happening at the same time in the studio, and they talk, they have a conversation, if you like, with each other.
So, this is something,
one work throws up one question that gets resolved by something else, and I'm hoping that's, it kind of comes through. There are certain things that are resolved in some works, and then I have to kind of, resolve other issues in something else. So,
I don't want to jump too much in this presentation because it makes people nervous, I guess. But I have one example for this later on, which is really kind of stunning, because you think it's a linear development, but it isn't. But let me come back to one point you made several times now already, because you were mentioning Agnes Martin, you were referring to minimalism, and I think with this work, it's very obvious as well, the connection to minimalism as a kind of an art movement you are referring to, and you situate yourself within this timeline, apparently, and why is it so important for you to continue this tradition? Also, you said once, I believe, minimalism with a twist. So what is this exactly? What is your
I don't know. I'd like to think that that I'm kind of, I started off with minimalism and abstract art, and then I'd like to think that I'm kind of going beyond that. I love the language that Judd or Agnes Martin or Frank Seller were using during that period, and I think that's what I'm kind of drawn to, that kind of simplicity where you really appreciate a form or material that's kind of really, I felt is sometimes works in that period is described as quite soulless, quite cold, but actually for me there's something quite sensual about them, quite sensual about the materials that even Donald Judd uses. I feel like there's they really react to a space, to to architecture, to light, to the environment they're in. And I like to think that I'm kind of building on that rather than reiterating what is being done already. And it's the same approach that I have with Islamic art and architecture. You know, that's another kind of influence that that's quite significant in my work. And it's something that I found initially difficult to talk about, but now I feel like I'm at a stage in my work that I feel quite confident to kind of say, there is a big influence. I love kind of, I love this idea of the infinite. I like what the role geometry plays in the kind of the spiritual aspect of it. So there's lots of things that are kind of coming in. I don't know if I've answered your question now.
Yeah, so of course. And you would, I mean, this is the next slide. You can see, I mean, this is just the other context with the architecture in the background. And it's a further development of your London work, I would say, and the 695. And also we can come now to baskets, which are very interesting because you take a material which refers to I guess to another culture, and yeah, is it inspired by your cultural background using this material, the baskets, and in this context?
Yeah. Well, there's two things here. One is that I use a lot of ready-made materials. I mean, I'm interested in the industrial kind of man-made material, but I love the idea of using materials that you can kind of recognize and you see that are, every day, and that's always something that I've been drawn to and I've collected. I used to have a massive collection of adhesive tapes that I'd collect while I was traveling because they had a function. Their purpose wasn't to look beautiful, but there was an aesthetic to it that I was drawn to. In this case, it stemmed from a memory of growing up in Bangladesh. I used to weave baskets with my daddy, and I loved that kind of repetition. I loved that process and working with the hand. And then the other memory was reading the Quran in the mosque. I just remember this moment where you get, when things kind of just come together and you get goosebumps. It was one of those moments where sound, light, and just kind of the visual kind of everything came together. And when I got approached by Diana Betancourt to propose a piece of work, and they had a brief, which was that there was a budget and it had to be material that they could source in Bangladesh. And that's when those two kind of moments or memories kind of came together. And I wanted to create a space that allowed people to experience the light. And fortunately, the light at the time was quite intense and it was really beautiful. So the images that you're showing here is actually at Kettle's Yard, the church at Kettle's Yard. And so this is the third time I produced this work. And what I loved about this location was this connection of two religion kind of coming together, or experience of two religion coming together. And, because the initial experience was of being in the mosque and experiencing light and sound, and so and then putting it in the church for me reminded me of when I was kind of traveling around Spain and kind of visiting Alhambra, and where you've got the two religion kind of coming together. So there was a kind of an interesting connection there that I liked.
Yeah, and again, so it's about a shared spiritual experience as well, isn't it? Which is common to all religions in a way. And then again, I mean, on the right image, you can see the light. I mean, the light coming through. And then I guess it worked a lot with the shadows as well. I mean, we don't see it on the photos, but then we also have.
Yeah, well, in this particular location, you had some natural light coming in. There were windows there. So throughout the few months that it was up, you know, there'd be moments where it felt quite honeycomb-like space. You know, you felt like you were in something that was quite warm, but other times there would be light kind of filtering through the stained glass windows, coming through the basket. And I love all those different experiences that you had of light. And I think, you know, again, I would say this is one of the work that is about kind of your senses, your visual senses, as well as your kind of, you know, bodily kind of, you know, physical experience in the space.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, it's unfortunately I didn't see it, but it looks fantastic through the photos as well. What I found stunning is the way you are working in your studio and with the models and with all the different materials, as you were already saying, with the adhesive tape, and also with your mobile phone to kind of imitate the way of light goes through and to experiment. Maybe you could expand a bit on this, how you really develop your works.
Models are a really important tool for me, especially when if I'm working on a proposal for public art or a show. It's a really important tool to kind of, one, understand a material and its structural properties. And also the other is scale. I remember actually when I was at Chelsea, I wanted to make large scale work and I couldn't afford to, I didn't have the money. And so I would make kind of small works, maquettes and things like that, that would help kind of iterate what, you know, what it would look if it was made at a larger scale. But yeah, you can see in the background on the top shelf, these are some of the models that I've worked on for various projects. And I really enjoy them. I think for me, it's really interesting to see the difference in the scale as well. And I love seeing how, you know, there isn't actually much different when you can physically make a small model, and then when you actually make the work, there isn't much difference between other than the scale.
Okay.
And that's what's really exciting when you are working on a project. So I'm doing one for Boston Fine Art Museum, and I don't know where the model is actually. Oh, there, isn't it? Yeah, I can show you. You know, so this is like a window, which you can see here. And this is quite exciting because, so that's the back actually. So this is, you can see, and it's really important because I wanted to test out here in the studio before I did a site visit. So I flew over to Boston and I wanted to test out how the light might work and if it will reflect and stretch out and enter the space. And it was really brilliant. It was so good to kind of resolve it before I went over, and it meant the site visit was much more kind of useful in terms of the possibility with the material was great. So I'm exploring that a bit more at the moment.
Great. So now have a look. This is how your works are placed in our exhibition right now.
Great, it's good to see
the
you.
ways of seeing abstraction, and we are really proud that we have these works on paper from by yours. And what is your attraction about paper? I mean, is it also because, and these are on tracing paper, which is paper which lets light through, and also light affects paper very strongly. I mean, we know, having a collection of paperworks, how sensitive paper is as well, if it comes to light. And is it something, or what is it what attracts you about paper?
Well, I think, again, I think it's a lot to do with tactileness and being able to touch the material, being able to kind of put your hand on it and feel the texture. But for me, I liked this kind of transparent, kind of slightly transparent paper. So with this particular paper, it was two packets of paper that I found in this building originally. So this used to be an engineering factory. And there's a slight kind of discolor in the paper that I love as well. And I loved that kind of softness to it. I love the transparency, how it allows light to kind of filter through. And so the drawings are kind of building on that layer, that layering idea and transparency. And so this is another series of drawings that I've been working on during lockdown as well. And I found the rhythm, the repetition quite calming. And what's interesting about these ones is that the slight shift of the line and how that creates movement within that page or within that perimeter. So that was quite interesting. So I'm still kind of I've done some recently actually that I'm also really excited about. So it's really nice to see them framed and up on the wall.
Have a look, these as well. These ones.
Oh, they look great framed.
Near to Wani Kiwanga's work, and it's really very beautiful. Nice. And what have you been doing there? It's a folded grid, and then you spray it on the paper. And look, it looks again like reflections.
So this is a body of work that started, I think, initially in 2009. And so I have these moments in the studio where I need a break from kind of hard edge geometry that I use, and where I'm looking for, I guess, a flow within the work or things to naturally happen. And looking for kind of moments where sometimes accidents can, lead to something else. So I made a couple of these pieces in 2009, and then I didn't have time. I was really busy, and I left it up on the wall, and I came back to it in 2018. And I felt like I had time to then focus. So this is A4 pieces of paper that are folded into grid, unfolded, and then scrunched up again, unfolded, and then sprayed using literally just two colors, where I feel it highlights the way the light falls onto the surface. And it's really beautiful how, and also it kind of does something with your eyes, where it just creates this undulation, which I like to kind of think is kind of organic geometry, if you like. And it's a nice connection with landscape. Again, it's something that I've been kind of thinking about within my work for a while. And, I feel like more and more I've been thinking about nature. I've been thinking about, kind of greenery or landscape and seeing, So I feel like it's slowly kind of seeping into the work.
So we can go on and we can just jump through this. This was what I said before, that I had the idea without seeing the dates that one follows the other. Like you come from water, you come from a paper, you go to a panel, and then you go to architecture, which is not true, as you already explained.
There's a lot of back and forth. Actually, for instance, the bar works came first. And if you go back to the watercolors, the one on the left, I did that when I was traveling around South Africa, because again, I knew, I would need moments to kind of escape. I mean, I see them as escape because I can just completely, when I'm doing the watercolors, it's wonderful to be able to get lost in the brush stroke or the colors that you're using. But initially I started doing watercolors during my residency with Tate St. Ives. And I found that really helpful. So I traveled with watercolors now. And then the two on the right are watercolors that I worked on with my team during lockdown. And again, it was about kind of rhythm and repetition and creating kind of, I guess, an image that was kind of quite calming. I found myself during lockdown, the colors became much more kind of muted and less kind of vibrant, if you like, and became lighter and more transparent as well.
Yeah, and then it's so stunning to see how it
there's a nice connection with
comes
the
back
the bar works that
and also with the architecture. I'm just jumping now a bit because time is already it's quite late, so to say it easier. What I found interesting here is again that you go for prefabricated material, something you find, and then you build something, and also what is the position of the viewer in this kind of settings. I was reminded of a now already, it seems like an outdated word, these immersive installations. In lockdown we don't talk about this anymore, and so but how immersive do you want these to be, and how open are you towards the viewer, to the participant? Is it a non-didactic approach, or how are you thinking about somebody going in there?
For this particular work, so it stemmed from this came after the basket installation. So for me, I guess you could say I got a bit more confidence after the basket installation, and particularly watching people walk through or take a moment and sit and experience light. I came back to the studio and I was like, okay, I really want to find a material that would allow me to create a structure that people could walk through and experience not only light but also color and movement. And so this is really, in order to really experience this work, you have to walk through it. You have to kind of engage with the work. And as you walk through, colors appear and disappear and they shift. And so that was quite important for me to be able to see, for the viewer to be able to experience that fully. It's very, I mean, you can see in the left image, that was the model that we made, and then the reality is on the right. So the colors are, feels much more muted, but actually overall it's quite overwhelming, but it's quite light. You don't feel claustrophobic in the space. It felt like you were walking into a silhouette drawing.
So there we are again.
Yeah.
And then what I found quite stunning is that you get, one could say, you open up even with the material, and you get even more, experiment even more, and it has something very playful, these works with a net, like the one for the show in Mumbai, or over here, if you look at this one for London Fashion Week, then here doing something with fingerprints, completely different materiality. So are you developing more in this direction, getting more playful?
Well, I think the pandemic has definitely has forced us all to reconsider how we work and how we continue to work internationally. I think, before the pandemic, I was already exploring ideas and materials, and wanting to kind of loosen up, if you like, with the work, where it's much freer, much more organic. And in this case, for instance, the fingerprint piece, I had actually discovered, I came across this kind of space a few years ago when I was in Bangladesh. I had to, my father had left some land and he'd donated, and all of us kind of siblings had to kind of sign over this land. And it wasn't enough just to put a signature on a piece of paper. You had to also go and put your thumbprint. And you had to go into the office. And in that office, the whole space was covered with fingerprints. And there was something about that space and the way the fingerprints, the remnants of the fingerprints was left, that is this beautiful connection with architecture and land. And I was kind of really moved by that experience of going over to Bangladesh, signing that land over, putting the fingerprint on, and that whole experience was very moving. And so when Diana Betancourt asked me to propose a piece of work, I said that I would like to kind of explore this idea. And so the location was then put forward. And I loved this journey of people going up and down the stairs, that the work is almost kind of lost, but it's kind of flowing. So initially it was supposed to be work that was much more interactive, that every time someone came into the space, they would put their fingerprint. But because there was lots of other artwork happening, we had to kind of rethink that approach. So I actually then got a lot of volunteer students to help me create this artwork, and it was really interesting. And I loved this kind of approach to work where you could paint over it, and it didn't become about material, it became about the idea and
with the layers
experience of it as well.
And also it's something about the density and visual experience also. This kind of op art effect in a way, but it's already quite late, but there we could go on for hours. I mean, this is where you were saying
I had too many works. I shouldn't.
No, but it's beautiful. And this is where you were saying you are drawn more to the landscape now. Oh, your daughter. Hi.
These are the
beach.
So this is for Folkestone Triennial, and it's currently up and can be seen. And I'm really excited because, again, working in a slightly different way, and I had to figure out a way how I can bring the entire kind of promenade together, if you like, how I can tie all the beach huts together, because they're in groups. They're also kind of the beach is very long, so
you can see it there.
Yeah, and it goes further to the left as well and right, so there are more beach huts. So it's important to kind of tie them all up and bring movement within it.
Hope to see it.
I see that there's a question there.
I also have a question. I have one, because I think we have to open up. I would like to know. I can't see the chat, but Oliver sent it to me. So I have a question by Saul Judd, whom I actually know. Hi, Saul. Great to have you. He's asking, Rana, you think something is missing in minimalism or in the minimalistic aesthetics today? You think it should evolve because our time and technology?
I don't believe there is anything missing in the minimalism. I think what I'm looking for is to add my own kind of experience and the visual experience that I have of minimalist work. I think for me, I respond, like I said earlier, how minimalist or abstract art can sometimes be experienced as cold and clinical, and actually it's not, you know. And I think that's the thing that I'm looking for within my work. And sometimes it's also kind of this dual experiences that I'm looking for, you know, whether it's used, you know, so for instance, the bar works, on one side you have these kind of vibrant fluorescent colors, and on the other side you've got kind of much more muted pastel colors. And that's, you know, it's important for me that you
I wanted to go to the
those,
bar.
yeah, those experiences are important. I think the dual kind of experiences. And I think I feel like, yeah, as artists, you know, it is our job to kind of evolve and add to it. I don't think you can be stuck in this one period, I think, and especially, you know, technology has opened up so many possibilities now, and we should be taking on board. And I feel like I'm in a really fortunate position, because I get to, being an artist, I get to collaborate with you know, people from various different disciplines and have conversations that really enrich my work, whether it's engineers, designers, writers, musicians, architects. You know, it's really important, because you don't live in a world where none of those things affect you. You live in a world where all of those things has an impact on your life, your experience of space and view of the world. So yeah, I hope that answers.
This is something we talked about before briefly, because when we talked about these two projects you just undertook in the last month, working with for a fashion company, work fashion and workwear, and at the same time also participating at a social committed project, designing a plate, and the proceeds of this are donated to homeless people. And yeah, I understood now that, because the question was a very heavy question to ask you, well, how do you see your role as an artist in society? But I guess it's...
Yeah, I guess that's quite really open-ended. But I think I feel like I'm in a position, I mean, I've always wanted to do something that would be helpful. I mean, I wanted to teach, but I realized I wasn't very good at teaching. I do teaching, but it's quite draining teaching, it physically and mentally quite draining. So I enjoy it when I do teaching now and then, but I always feel like it's not enough. And that's what my parents would have loved me to have done, to do teaching or something like that. So I think for me, when I feel like I'm in a position now where I can, you know, the artwork not only brings a positive kind of experience to people's life, I'm also aware of where the work, you know, goes, because sometimes it goes into private collection, the public don't get to experience it. And that's why it's important to do projects like this, whether it's beach huts, you know, in Folkestone, or you know, creating these plates that are much more accessible, or working with a local fashion brand, you know, and supporting local businesses. For me, it's really important not to be closed off and not to shut doors, and to keep conversations open, which I think then generates another kind of you know, kind of enriching experience for people, and connection with your work, you know, that people can have. I think that's important.
Yeah, no, really. That sounds like let's see whether there are some questions, but I just checked, but they're not. Maybe Oliver can see if there, do you see any question in the chat? Because I can't see the chat actually.
And no, I don't see any more questions. Everyone's very quiet. I was expecting more questions.
Okay, we've talked too much. But I mean, this was a nice ending, Rana, and I thank you so much. We've talked quite some time, and it was really very interesting. And I have to say, I learned a lot, and thanks really for your time. And
Well,
yeah,
thank you so much,
maybe
Britta.
you can make it coming over to Berlin. The exhibition goes
Yeah,
on
I'd
quite
love
a
to
while.
see it. It looks great.
Yeah, it would be lovely to have you over. Let's see. I mean, let's see how
Hope we
things
can travel
develop.
again.
Yes, keep our fingers crossed. And
Yeah, I
thank you.
am enjoying I am enjoying the not traveling so much though. It's nice to be here at home and have time to focus on the work. You know,
Yeah,
that was one of the things that I really juggled in 2018 and 2019 was um, the amount of traveling I was doing and not having time to focus on work. Um,
yeah. You and as we could see, you created quite something during this time, and you moved houses. So,
yes, I moved
as I
out
learned,
of the studio. I'm still trying to sort out my studio. I have a
looks
small,
great.
yeah. So
Okay, so thank you very, very much again, and yeah, talk to you again. I think we
okay,
could do a second talk as well.
okay, great. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for listening.
Take care.
Bye. Bye.
Bye, bye, bye. Thank you.